How Whitey Bulger Met His End Behind Bars at Hazelton Prison. True crime documentary. The moment Whitey Bulger's wheelchair rolled into the dark hallway of Hazelton Prison's Unit C, something felt wrong. It was just after 6 in the morning. The lights were dim, the cameras in parts of the unit were not working well, and the guards who should have been watching him were far away on the other side of the block. Bulger was an old man now, 89 years old, weak and slow, but as he moved deeper into the unit, several inmates were already watching him with cold eyes. They had been waiting. They knew he was coming. Within minutes of his arrival, the sound of metal touching metal echoed down the hallway. Someone had opened a cell door that should have stayed locked. Steps moved quickly toward him. Bulger looked up, confused and scared as shadows surrounded him. What happened next was fast, silent, and brutal. The inmates moved with purpose, like they had planned this moment long before he arrived. Hazelton Prison was known for violence, but on this morning it reached a level that shocked even longtime staff. Just as the attack began, the prison seemed to fall into a deeper silence, as if every wall was holding its breath. Something terrible was unfolding inside that cell. The old man who once controlled the streets of Boston was now fighting for his life with almost no one watching. And just as the violence reached its peak, the hallway lights flickered, leaving everything in a cold blue shadow. The scene ended in seconds, but the damage would echo for years. The guards would not discover what happened until it was already too late, and by the time they opened the cell, they would face a sight that would shake the entire country. Years earlier, this ending had already begun to form. Whitey Bulger had spent decades as one of America's most feared crime bosses. For years, he ran Boston's underworld like a king, but at the same time, he secretly worked as an FBI informant. Many criminals felt betrayed by him, and even some law enforcement officers were embarrassed that they had protected him for so long. When Bulger finally got caught in 2011 after 16 years on the run, anger followed him everywhere. Inside the prisons where he was held, nearly every inmate knew his story. To them, Bulger wasn't just a criminal. He was someone who broke one of the biggest unwritten rules: never work with the government. His age didn't matter. His wheelchair didn't matter. His history made him a target in almost every facility he entered.
For a long time, the prison system tried to keep him safe by moving him from one place to another. But each transfer brought new dangers. By 2018, Bulger was moved again, this time to Hazelton Prison in West Virginia. Hazelton already had a reputation for being understaffed, overcrowded, and dangerous. Inmates called it Misery Mountain, and many officers said it was one of the toughest federal prisons to work in. Bulger arrived there with a warning attached to his name, but the moment he was rolled into the general population instead of protective custody, everything changed. People who had been waiting for him, including men tied to organized crime groups, suddenly had access to him. And in a prison where doors sometimes open when they shouldn't, and guards were stretched thin, it didn't take long for trouble to find him. The tension grew quietly. Some inmates whispered, others watched him with cold interest, and on the morning of October 30, 2018, the danger he had been escaping for decades finally caught up with him inside that cell. The guards moved toward the cell with slow, careful steps, not knowing what they were about to see. Hazelton Prison was a place where fights happened often, but this felt different. Something was wrong. When they finally reached the door and pulled it open, a wave of silence washed over them. Inside the cell, lying on the floor, was Whitey Bulger. The scene was brutal. His face was badly beaten, and it was clear that whoever attacked him wanted to make a statement. This was not a warning. This was a message. For a moment, no one spoke. The guards froze. The prison unit around them stayed quiet, as if everyone already knew what had happened long before the officers did. One guard stepped farther into the cell and quickly signaled for help, but deep down, they knew the truth. Help was too late. Bulger's body was still, and the damage was far beyond anything that could be fixed. One of America's most infamous crime bosses had just taken his final breath in one of the most dangerous prisons in the country. As the news spread, inmates peeked from their cells, whispering and nodding to one another. Some looked satisfied. Others acted like they expected this to happen. Hazelton was supposed to be a place of punishment, but this felt more like an execution. And in that moment, everyone inside the prison understood one thing clearly. The past had finally caught up with Whitey Bulger.
The prison went into lockdown almost immediately. Doors slammed shut, guards rushed through the halls. Radios crackled with quick, tense voices. Investigators were called in from every direction. Hazelton had seen violence before, but nothing that would draw this level of attention. Not from the FBI, not from national news, and not from the highest levels of the federal prison system. Everyone wanted to know the same thing. How did this happen only hours after Bulger arrived? While officers secured the unit, investigators began piecing together the puzzle. They reviewed cameras, but some of them were not working. They checked logs, but some entries were missing or incomplete. They questioned inmates, but most remained silent. Inside Hazelton, silence was safer than truth. But one thing became clear very quickly. Whitey Bulger's killers did not act out of anger in the moment. They acted with planning. The suspects were all inmates with long histories of violence. One was a man tied to organized crime, someone who had spent most of his life behind bars and was known for being loyal to the old rules of the underworld. Another had a reputation for attacking enemies without hesitation. Together, they had watched Bulger into their unit and saw an opportunity that many believed they would take. Prison officials later said the attack was carried out using a padlock stuffed inside a sock, a weapon commonly used in prisons for silent, deadly blows. But the biggest question hung in the air like a storm cloud. Why was Whitey Bulger placed in general population at all? He had enemies everywhere. His background as an informant made him one of the most hated people in the federal prison system. Many believed he should have been placed in protective housing. Yet, somehow, he was rolled into Hazelton's most dangerous area without any special guard.
While investigators argued over what went wrong, the reality was simple. Inmate gossip traveled faster than official papers. The moment Bulger arrived, people inside Hazelton knew. And in a place where revenge ran deep, it didn't take long for plans to form. As the chapter closes, Hazelton Prison is facing a storm like it has never seen before. Reporters gather outside, officials scramble for answers, and behind the prison walls, the men responsible for the killing sit quietly, waiting for what comes next. But the biggest shock of all is still ahead, as investigators begin uncovering details that raise an even darker question. Was this brutal killing an inmate attack, or did someone on the inside help make it happen? The investigation into Whitey Bulger's killing exploded almost instantly. Federal agents poured into Hazelton Prison, filling the halls with sharp footsteps and serious faces. They questioned guards, checked logs, studied every broken camera, and walked through the unit again and again. But the more they looked, the stranger everything seemed. It was as if pieces of the puzzle had been moved on purpose. And that raised a chilling thought among investigators. Maybe someone inside the system wanted this to happen. The first major red flag was the transfer itself. Bulger had been moved from a medical prison even though he was almost 90 years old, in a wheelchair, and very weak. Normally, someone like him would stay where he could receive constant care. But suddenly, without warning, he was moved to Hazelton, a place known for violence and short staffing. Even some prison officials were surprised by the decision. One investigator said it felt like Bulger had been dropped into a lion's cage.
The second red flag was even more shocking. Just hours after arriving, instead of being placed in protective custody, Bulger was put directly into general population. The area he entered was filled with inmates who hated informants. He didn't stand a chance. When investigators looked into who approved it, answers became blurry. Some staff said it was a mistake. Others said they were told to do it. And a few said they had no idea he was even coming until he was already there. But the third red flag was the darkest of all. On the morning Bulger was killed, the doors on the unit didn't operate the way they normally did. Certain cells opened when they shouldn't have. Cameras pointed in the wrong directions. Some guards were missing from their posts. It was as if everything lined up perfectly for the attackers, giving them the time and opportunity they needed. Investigators quietly wondered if someone had allowed it to happen, not directly, not openly, but passively by making sure no one interrupted it. The idea traveled through the halls like a cold wind, but proving it would be nearly impossible. Meanwhile, the inmates suspected of the killing stayed calm. They did not panic. They did not hide. One of them reportedly bragged, saying Bulger got what he deserved. He acted like this was not a murder, but justice served. To him, Bulger wasn't an elderly man. He was a man who had betrayed the criminal code. And in the world of hardened prisoners, betrayal carried the highest price.
Days passed. The media exploded with stories. Some people said the prison failed to protect a man in their care. Others said Bulger's past had finally caught up with him. But inside Hazelton, nothing changed. The inmates went back to their routines. The guards kept doing their jobs. And the cell where Bulger died stayed sealed, quiet, and cold. Months later, the final reports came out. They listed the suspects. They explained the injuries. They described how the beating was fast and violent. But they did not answer the biggest question. Was Bulger killed only by inmates, or did the prison system itself open the door, even if only by mistake? That mystery still hangs in the air, and every time someone looks into the details, they find something new that doesn't make sense. In the end, Whitey Bulger's life ended in the same way he lived it, surrounded by secrets, fear, and betrayal. Hazelton Prison became the place where decades of anger finally exploded, and the truth behind that morning may never be fully known. But one thing is certain: the moment the guards opened that cell door, it sent a message to the whole country, reminding everyone that even the most dangerous criminals can one day face something even more dangerous. Thank you for watching. If you want more real American true crime stories like this one, make sure you subscribe, turn on the notification bell, and comment which case you want next.